First of all, what do these CDC guidelines say? I think there has been a little bit of a misinterpretation of these guidelines when they came out about 2 weeks ago. Initially, what I think a lot of people saw, maybe a headline in the news or a tweet or something like that, and they saw, oh, new CDC guidelines say that everybody can come back, full-time in-person learning, no social distancing, it's all over, COVID's done, we're back. That's not the case. That's not at all what they say. What they say is every school can bring in students in some capacity, whether it's full or hybrid, regardless of the level of viral spread in the community. Again, they don't say that every school can now fully open without mitigation. That's not the case. But what they do say is every school can do something with proper mitigation. They're not requirements. There's nothing binding about them. They're guidance, just as we have guidance from Illinois Department of Public Health and the Lake County Department of Health. But they do offer a slightly different view of our community metrics that I've shown you before. We've adjusted, and I'll demonstrate the new look, I guess, but they are very consistent with what we have used to guide our practice.
Nicole, I'm so sorry to interrupt, but I'm not seeing, I don't think we're on the right screen, perhaps.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's okay. I'm so sorry to interrupt.
No, thank you. I hit pause share and then didn't unpause it.
Okay.
Can you see that now?
Yes,
better.
Looks great.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Okay. Anyway, they're overall very highly aligned with our policies and current practice. I'll go through that quickly. And these are quotes right from the document. Evidence suggests that many K-12 schools that have strictly implemented mitigation strategies have been able to safely open for in-person instruction and remain open, again, full or hybrid. And at any level of community transmission, all schools have options to provide in-person instruction, full or hybrid, through strict adherence to mitigation strategies. What are those strategies? Those are the same mitigation strategies that we've been talking about for about a year. But they really prioritize universal and correct use of masks, no big surprise there, but also physical distancing, again, of at least 6 feet. And other mitigation strategies that are certainly important, hand washing, respiratory etiquette, cleaning and contact tracing. Wow, can't speak tonight. But again, they really, really highlight masks and physical distancing. Again, as we know more about the virus, we know how it works in schools, that's where they have put their priorities. So I want to go through the metrics a little bit. Kind of their presentation is a little bit different. If you recall from the Lake County guidance that we had before, we had 3 colors, 3 categories there. CDC uses 4, no big deal. So high transmission, substantial, moderate, and low transmission. On the rows, those are the same 2 indicators that we've been using. So one is the incidence rate, the number of cases per 100,000 people in the past 7 days, and the positivity, the percent of tests that are positive in an area. Okay. I'll go into where we're actually at right now, but just to show you where our data is coming from, it's all on our data site. So I look at that dot chart every day, and I just pick the most recent dot. And on 2/21, it was 10.3. I'll explain what that is. And then I go to the Lake County, actually the Region 9 page, which has the Lake County positivity rate, and just choose the latest one. And on 2/21, it was 3.6%. So if you recall where our numbers were, you take a look at that dot plot, kind of that peak, that was up in the 80s, and now it's down to 10. So just some fantastic progress on our community spread. That's not to say the virus is gone. It is not. It is still in our community, so we still have to practice mitigation. But this is our data. So this is a screenshot right from our data site. I modeled it after the CDC. So basically that 10.3, my pointer there, that 10.3. So here's the new interpretation. That 10.3 is an average, but it's based on 1 day. It would be the 1 day on average every day, currently 10.3 positive cases per 100,000 citizens. The CDC uses a 7-day, like over the last 7 days. So basically you take that number and multiply by 7. So 10.3 becomes 72.1, and it's putting us solidly in the substantial transmission. Again, these are the same numbers, just kind of a slightly different scale. Prior to the CDC coming in with these numbers, this mark right here, the kind of this line right here was 14, right? When we got over 14, we were planning to go hybrid in November. The numbers started to spike up. They hit 14 and then just shot up to 80. Just to show you, this is the same stuff. 14 times 7 is 98. So it's basically the same. They rounded up just to make it easier for us. So effectively the same numbers. And again, the positivity rate is 3.6. Again, way down here at low transmission for that number. Per the CDC, if we do have these two numbers, and if the two indicators suggest different levels, as these do, the actions corresponding to the higher threshold should be, so choose the higher number of the two. According to Lake County Health also, and this is consistent with what we've been doing for the last 10 months, this is the number they're more concerned with. That is a more accurate measure of community spread necessarily than the positivity rate. Be that as it may. Moving on. So really quickly, this just shows how they display the data and kind of the interpretation of the data. So if you kind of look down these columns, if we are in high transmission, it gives you an idea that, sorry, let me come up here, all schools, mask use, physical distancing, hand washing, respiratory, all of that, no matter what level you're at, that's still important. Diagnostic testing, if you can, not every district can do that, but that's still appropriate at all levels. But once we start to get to the high transmission, I just highlighted the middle and high schools, virtual only is their recommendation. Again, these are recommendations. Middle and high schools and hybrid learning under substantial transmission, which is where we're at. So they would recommend a hybrid model or reduced attendance. Physical distancing of 6 feet is required. Once we start to get to the moderate, oops, sorry about that. I'm having trouble there, okay. Down to these lower transmission indicators, we're gonna need a little bit more guidance on what they mean by this. It's a little bit vague. So K-12 schools should be could be open for full person instruction, but physical distancing of 6 feet or more to the greatest extent possible. And those are a little bit contradictory, but again, these are guidelines. They're just trying to give schools a little bit of a roadmap, a little bit of a plan, depending on where the community spread is in their area. It also gives guidance for extracurriculars and sports. So again, us being in substantial transmission, where we are at based on IHSA, we're actually a little bit more open than they would recommend. But again, we're going off the recommendations from IHSA and Lake County Health for these guidelines. Wanted to give a little bit of an update on vaccinations also. They talk about vaccinations, and this was kind of one of the bigger headlines when this came out, that you don't need to have the entire staff fully vaccinated to be able to, again, do something and bring the students back in some way. Access to vaccination should not be considered a condition for reopening schools for in-person instruction, but even after teachers and staff are vaccinated, schools need to continue mitigation measures for the foreseeable future, including masks and physical distancing. Just to give you all an update, at this time, we think most of our staff have had dose 1, those who have wanted it. And again, mostly Moderna, a couple of Pfizer's, but for the most part, the Moderna vaccine. If vaccine supplies hold, and that's been the big limiting factor of this, staff will have dose 2 by the end of March, which means being fully vaccinated 2 weeks after you get dose 2, most of our staff would be fully vaccinated mid-April-ish. So that's very good news. And again, it's also very good news that it seems like the vaccine production is ramping up, so we should get more vaccine, a bigger volume of vaccine very shortly here. Okay, so I want to talk about next steps a little bit and what we might do to expand our capacity, the number of students that are in school in person, again, doing it safely, doing it with the proper mitigations. I think there's a bit of a fallacy when people think about opening schools up or bringing more people back, and because they see sporting events, right? We would see empty stadiums, and then we would start to see a few more people filling in. They would sort of have these physically distanced pods of folks, and then all of a sudden everybody's back, right? It would be nice if we could do that. If it was a nice continuous process, we could bring back some students and some more students and some more students. That smooth progression sounds nice, but schools don't quite work like that. We don't have that space. We have lots of different types of spaces that we have to consider, and so there's some limitations on what we can do. Once again, wanted to highlight the 6 feet social distancing is still a thing. It is still a recommendation of CDC. It is very much the recommendation of the Illinois Department of Public Health. If you notice on the CDC website, just highlighted, 6 feet is right there in the top right. And stay at least 6 feet from others who don't live with you. Okay, so again, the 6 feet is a big thing. We are still in phase 4 for Restore Illinois. So just wanted to, pulled some text from that. And again, under phase 4, in-person instruction may resume. As regions transition to phase 4, districts must follow the IDPH guidelines, including prohibiting more than 50 individuals from gathering in one space, and that impacts a number of things. Our PE classes, some of our music classes, certainly our cafeterias and our ability to provide lunch. But also requiring social distancing be observed as much as possible. And schools and districts are encouraged to provide completely in-person instruction, provided that we can comply with capacity limits and implement social distancing measures. Okay. So again, hopefully I've beaten this dead horse enough. The masking and the physical distancing are still a big thing, even though our numbers are coming down. Just another reminder of close contacts. A close contact is any individual that has confirmed to be within 6 feet, again 6 feet, for 15 minutes or longer with a person who is tested positive. And anybody who is a close contact will be required to quarantine for 10 to 14 days, depending on where you land on our flow chart, from the last day they had contact with the infected person. This is our decision tree, how we do quarantining. I don't want to go through this. It's people who use it every day, like our nurses, like Danielle. Your eyes start to cross. My point is it's very complex. There are lots of different permutations of who is sick or positive or symptomatic or close contact. It's quite a puzzle, and it changes several times a month at least. So once again, on our data site, you'll see this chart, and every row again is the number of people that day, total that day. So if you're looking at the number of students quarantined, the 22nd, 23rd, 24th, these are likely the same group of students, right? Or here, students quarantined at North, we had 28, and then it dropped down to 11, so we had 17 students drop off, and then probably the same 11 students there. Okay, so I've gone through all of that, and hammered 6 feet over and over and over again for a reason. Again, I think there was a misconception about these guidelines that people took it to mean that everybody can come back no matter what. It's, we're all done, it's fine, everybody's fine. So here's actually one of our classrooms at North, and that is the current setup, and it's 6 foot physical distancing. I actually measured it out. It's very handy. Our floor tiles are 1 foot by 1 foot, very helpful. But that is our current setup. That is our current safe physical distancing setup. For the sake of argument, I brought back a number of desks, and it's 3 to 4 feet physical distancing. That's actually about as close as you can get. Otherwise, you can't move up and down the rows. You can't move throughout the room. But effectively, that's a normal classroom. That would be full person, fully in-person learning if we use that setup. So, knowing what we know about the virus, knowing what we know about quarantining, let's say, for example, it comes up positive, and this has happened. This has happened where a student has been in our classrooms, and we later find out the student tests positive for COVID, right? With that 6 feet of physical distancing, none of those desks are within 6 feet. So when we do our contact tracing, none of the students that might be in those desks would have to quarantine. By contrast, if we have a student roughly in the same part of the room, I did measure all of these off, all of those students in all of those desks would be close contacts, right? So again, that's a big reason why we are still sticking with physical distancing. But of course we know in high schools, it's not just one period that a student would go to, right? Oh, excuse me. So in that case, we would have 1 student in quarantine for 10 to 14 days. In this case, we've got 8 additional students, all of the students surrounding the positive student for 10 to 14 days. As I said, as we know, students are not in one period per day. That student would be in period 1, period 2, period 3, period 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. In this very oversimplified example, we could have 64 additional students in quarantine for 10 to 14 days, not to mention adults and teachers and things like that. But 64 additional students in quarantine for 10 to 14 days, and that's just on day 1. We have had students, again, who are in hybrid, doing everything they're supposed to be doing. Later on, maybe they go to a doctor's appointment or something like that, get a COVID test and find out they tested positive. That student would quarantine, of course, but that student could have been in school for 2 days, right? And could have, all of these other students might have to quarantine just because they are close contacts. And that's best case scenario. Of course, we don't want that student to infect anybody else and cause other problems. So when we're talking about coming back full time, the reduction of physical distancing, that we can't get away from that. All right, the physical distancing. If we're going to come back full time, we would have to, something would have to be, new guidance would have to come out about 6 feet, and it would be okay to reduce the number of feet that, reduce the physical distancing requirements. So again, per the CDC, IDPH, and LCD, Lake County Department of Health, physical distancing should be maximized to the greatest extent possible. That greatest extent possible has caused a little bit of confusion as well. So some people interpret that 6 feet to the greatest extent possible, but we want all our kids back, so it's not possible, so forget it. That's not the correct interpretation. Physical distancing of at least 6 feet in the classroom, as we've described with the desks, that is the correct interpretation. In the classroom, 6 feet is the standard. When we're out in the hallways, that's to the greatest extent possible. Those are some areas where it's harder to keep people away 6 feet, or in the bathrooms or things like that. We do the best we can, but we know, sometimes students will walk down the hall side by side, things like that. But again, within the classroom, that's the most important thing, mitigation as far as 6 feet. Again, does not mean that all in-class physical distance can be cut to 3 feet or 4 feet or what have you, to the greatest extent possible for the hallways and bathrooms. With our current setup, COVID positive students who have been in our buildings have not sent their classmates or teachers into quarantine. We've sent out letters just to let people know, hey, we have found out there was a student who has tested positive. Families, if your child is a close contact, we will let you know once we do the contact tracing, but we have not had to shut entire rooms down. We have not had to shut the school down. We have not had what the health department would call an outbreak by any means. Some schools who have reduced that physical distancing have had to shut down, for longer periods, because if they have an outbreak, that tends to be a problem. You have to shut the school down. So for us, the next large jump in bringing more students back would be possible when physical distancing in the classroom is no longer necessary, or reduced to a point where we could get back to a normal classroom setup. Also, the concern over these COVID variants is growing as well. So again, thankfully our numbers are coming down, and they're coming down pretty quickly. However, as we've been talking with the health department, nobody's really sure how these variants are going to impact us. We're not sure how the different vaccines are going to react to some of these variants. I think the data is positive, but it's not for sure. So I kind of hang my hat on an interview I saw with Dr. Fauci, and he said, hey, with schools opening up, he was asked, are you worried about these variants? And he says, well, certainly the variants are something we have to look out for, but the mitigations are the same. We just have to keep doing what we're doing, and if we keep our masks on, and if we keep social distancing, regardless, we should be okay. So for us, our next steps, as I see them right now, again, take this all with a grain of salt. Things change rapidly, sometimes multiple times per week. At this moment in time, this is what I believe. So similar to our approach in November, when we were going to go hybrid, but we weren't able to quite do that, our first step was to bring in specialized groups of students who are maybe struggling or had different needs for 4 days and or in the afternoon. So sticking with our hybrid plan, but where we can, bringing in students more, again, particularly those students who have a greater need or are struggling more than other students. So again, it's just in the planning phases right now, but both students are working on bringing in some high need students. There may be some afternoon extension supporting students with IEPs. They're trying to get struggling students in 4 days per week, whether that's students with IEPs or 504 plans or some of our AIM students, or students who are failing a number of courses. So they're really trying to target those students that are failing or are struggling the most and trying to get them in as much as possible. Again, without going over classroom size limits, making sure we have space in the classrooms that those students, for those students' classes. Again, we're planning to have some of the students attend 4 days a week. Again, no guarantee, it depends on the space requirements of the classroom. And some might be able to remote in from the AIM resource room, and some would be in person. So again, that's in flux right now. As it starts to get worked out, we'll update the board on how that's going. Wanted to give the board a little bit of a timeline, kind of where we're at. So March 1, each little segment there's a week. So March 1st is next week. And then spring break would be March 22nd through the 26th. April 12th through the 16th, we will be offering standardized testing. There was a hope and there was I guess a plea to the federal government. As with last year, they waived the requirements for standardized testing that they normally would have. So we tried to get that same the waiver here with COVID, the uncertainty with COVID and all of that. It doesn't look like that's going to happen. There may be some, we may have some flexibility, and the state of Illinois, the State Board of Education will be applying for that from the federal government in terms of, we have to offer the test, but do all students have to take the test? Again, that's in flux right now. But that week of April 12th, we've got the PSAT, we've got the SAT, we've got the Illinois Science Assessment, access testing. Tracy, is there anything I've forgotten there?
Yeah, not that week. No, AP tests later.
Yeah, AP tests are later as well. So that week, April 12th through the 16th, may be an asynchronous week, just because we're going to need both buildings and just about all hands on deck to make that standardized test happen, sadly. So again, moving toward the end of the year, we're a lot closer than, it's coming quickly, let's put it that way. So May 18th through the 28th will be AP testing, and again, that's kind of in flux a little bit too. And Tracy, I think it could be AP testing might be done virtually or
yeah,
remotely. Sorry.
Advanced placements built in some flexibility this year. There's 3 testing windows where there's normally just the one, and so they're giving some flexibility around whether you do it paper pencil mandated in the building or whether you do some of these tests virtually. And they've built in 3 different testing windows. Different testing windows provide different kinds of flexibility. It actually extends into June, the 3rd testing window. So we are in the midst of going test by test and making some decisions. There's a few that have to be held in person. The language exams primarily have to be held in person at the school, but the others will have some flexibility. So we are working through all the options available to us for AP testing.
So as far as the COVID update, that's all we have right now. But just to say that our plan for next year, we have our new block schedule that we're working on and working on professional learning for our staff. But our plan at this point is, we're planning on coming back full in-person learning in August. Again, take that with a big grain of salt. We'll have to see how everything goes from now until then, but that is our plan right now.
If we could take a moment, and I want to see if any board members have questions, because this was a lot of information to digest.
I hadn't done a Memorex thing with you guys for a while, so just blowing your hair back a little bit. So
yeah, you are. I'm going to give everyone a minute to think and process this.
So, quick question about masks.
Yes.
I know in a similar interview with Dr. Fauci, he's began encouraging people to double mask, to wear the reusable mask beneath a cloth mask.
Right.
Is that language that we're telling our staff to do the same?
I think we're encouraging it. We're not mandating it at this point. You know, again, we're just happy that people have masks and they're doing well with it. But we haven't mandated the double mask, but certainly that is better if you can do that for sure.
Nicole, how many students, you said it was around about 60% of students that came back this time around?
As far as once everything sort of the dust settled, so to speak, and people got in the hybrid or remote groups that they wanted to, I believe it's about 40% of our students are fully remote the entire time, and then 60% of our students have a seat at the hybrid table, so to speak. That doesn't mean we have 30% on A days and another 30% on B days. You know, they're I don't have an actual percent of that, but a number of students, because we gave them the option. If they're not comfortable coming in the building, they could, or if you know they're not feeling well, or of course they're quarantining, they can remove themselves to remote and then come back in person anytime. But if everybody was back, it would be about 60% hybrid, 40% remote.
Okay, so what capacity is the space at right now with the 6 foot spacing? Do we have enough real estate to handle all kids coming back in the fall?
Well, I mean, again, that depends on the social distancing, and that assumes that social distancing is no longer a thing in August. Again, big grain of salt there.
That is a big assumption. So can we think about that a little bit? Would we have enough real estate to continue with social distancing into the fall, through the fall?
If social distancing is still a thing, or physical distancing is still a thing, no, it would have to be hybrid to start.
Okay.
Right. It would be similar to now. We don't have the capacity for 100% of our students to come in, for sure.
What is our capacity for students coming in? If we were to have, what would if we had 70% of our kids in the school at one time, what can we have in the school at one time to be do we know? Maybe I'm not asking the question properly.
No, I just want to make sure I'm giving you the correct number. I mean, right now, I think that's 60%, and anybody else chime in. I think that 60% is our capacity right now.
Broken up. Those are broken up. We have like 30, yeah.
Right, 30% at one time. Right.
Yes. Okay.
All
right, that's what
we can get more than 30% at any time.
Okay.
Yeah, we can. I think, you know, the classrooms are built for about 28 kids, and most of the standard size classrooms can get 14 kids and a teacher and maintain the space. Some of the laboratory areas can be bigger because they have the back side of the classroom is the lab. So, but I would say probably 65% from the majority of the school.
Okay, I'll open it up to other board members. My mind is blowing up right now.
Yeah, so
go ahead.
So I have a question.
Amy,
I mean, oh, sorry.
Amy, did you have a question? I'm sorry, Douglas.
I did,
Amy?
but I'll
No, go ahead.
I don't
No,
want to
Amy, I'm
interrupt.
sorry. No, I didn't see you. I'm
It's okay.
Amy.
So if our capacity number, what we will need to know at some point here, because I'm anticipating that there will be, opening in the fall. Just having that and just anticipating that, right? Just planning for that, and being, if not maybe in a hybrid mode, but in maybe 5 days a week. So what does that number look like? Or what that capacity might look like for those numbers. So right now, if it's split up, what if it's not split up? And what that capacity what it could take on. And if it can't take it on, then it has to still be split up. Or I know there's a staffing plan being proposed coming up, and I don't want to jump ahead on that, but are you looking at potentially still allowing for some remote, if that's what some people still want to do, and allowing for that staffing to take care of that while still allowing some people to come in?
Right. We are planning for, again, this has been a crazy year.
I know.
I don't think we would want to do what we're doing right now, in perpetuity.
I understand.
But
Right.
our teachers and the system, everybody in the system, including our teachers, are learning some really valuable teaching tools, right? And I think what we want to plan, and Tracy, I'll set you up for this in case I say anything wrong. I think we are planning for some potentially remote-only sections. Mm-hmm. So if there are some students in certain high-need classes, for whatever reason, that are able to that need to take that class remotely, we're looking at carving those sections out and having teachers that are dedicated to teaching those sections. Did I say that right, Tracy?
Yeah. So we'd be looking at yes, we'd be looking at carving out remote-only sections, so teachers aren't having to do that split. Some in front of you, some not, which is really, really hard for all involved. So yes, we are looking at, especially courses. The easiest place to do that across our entire course curriculum are those where we have multiple sections of a course. So we can turn one of those sections, or however many we need, into a remote-only section, and then work with those teachers. So, and that's what's nice about it, is because we're building a schedule from scratch, right? And we're not in the middle of a school year where we're limited by the existing schedule. When we're building brand new, it's a lot easier to accommodate and build for that. So yes, we have that in the back of our mind as we're going through our processes.
Okay.
All right. Douglas, did you have a?
I did, yeah. So I just wanted to look at what we were talking about, the numbers from a couple minutes ago, and a little bit different. Dr. Landry, Dan, you said that, we have 28 people in a class, 28 kids in the classroom, capacity with 14%, 14 students with the six feet, and we're running 40%. So you're saying on average, there's about 7-8 kids in the class?
I think it depends on the day.
Sure. I'm not trying to, nail it down for every class, but are you saying there's empty seats in the classrooms?
There are empty seats in most classrooms. There are a few classrooms that I visited that I actually had to count the number of students before I could go inside the classroom because they were that tight. But it really depends on the day and the course.
Okay.
So maybe to give a little sense of this, one of the things we were looking at just to see, can we expand our capacity? So we've got A days, students are coming in Tuesday, Wednesday, and B days, students coming in Thursday, Friday. What if we just said everybody come in? If you're a hybrid student, you come in 4 days. So what we had to do is look at the room capacities, right? The way that Barb and Jeff spent a tremendous amount of time kind of balancing that out. But if you've got a freshman English class, period 3, what if we put A and B days together in that room? We don't have the room capacity. It's I would say about 20% of our classes, if everybody showed up, and we have to plan for that and assume that, about 20% of our classes, it would go over that limit.
Okay.
By one or more students. And sometimes it's, double digits of students, depending on the class, right?
Sure.
So I don't know if that gives you kind of a sense.
That gives a lot better perspective of what holistic view of what I was asking. So thank you.
Sure.
And that gives us a lot of information of where we're at right now, because I'm again anticipating for the fall people wanting to even increase, but then some people I think there's still a section, a group of people that might peel off still, and that would potentially allow for space, but it sounds like still not enough. So, okay.
Yeah, and again, like people's attitudes, once, say, the Johnson & Johnson vaccine comes out, and if we're able to vaccinate, some of our adolescent students, that could change people's thoughts as well. Once we get all of our faculty who are fully vaccinated, but again, we just don't know. Again, our plan is we would love to start full-time in-person learning, but lots of variables still to come. So we're trying to be nimble with that.
And Michael,
go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry. I can give a little North perspective. Currently, we actually just ran our numbers recently, and with our 60% in-person split, I have 26% of our classrooms that I cannot add students to currently. So if we were to be back adjusting to the 6 feet, it's impossible for us to run both A and B together.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Can we look at the day differently and have evening classes or something like that? Have you thought of that or?
Yeah, I mean, lots of different scenarios are being run, you know.
Okay, all right.
For sure. It's
You're on
we're
it.
being vague, but it's just because we're trying to plan for lots of different possibilities. And as we've learned, you know, we try to jump on things and be, you know, Johnny on the spot with everything we can. But sometimes, as we have found, when we do that, and we have this set of assumptions, and then they get flipped around, you know, as soon as we make a plan. So we're trying to ride that line.
Of course.
You guys are doing a great job. I do have a question that I think was asked months and months and months ago that you guys have already considered. But for those classes that we know are you know, going over capacity, has it ever been considered to use some of the like the gymnasiums and the, you know, the field houses and those type of open spaces?
Yeah, I mean, all of our spaces are being used. In this case, this is our first shot at doing it. So and it was designed to be split up. No, yeah. I get it. But again, we might have a better sense of, oh, this particular, I'm going to make this up, like AP US History. Wow, that's one that students really want to come back for, and that was a big draw hybrid-wise. Maybe we need to put those in bigger rooms. I mean, that's a possibility. But again, we're going to have to learn as we go.
Okay.
All right.
I'm done.
Are there any other board member questions? Okay, I think we had a student question, if that's okay. Keegan, do you still have your question?
Oh, sure.
Okay.
Yeah, I was just wondering on the timeline, the graduation, did that get moved up?
I don't think so. Oops, sorry. Let me get
So it's still June 3rd then, correct? Okay. All right.
That's possible. Don't take my timeline as a, you know, I kind of eyeballed it. So yeah. Good question though.
Okay.